1942, and the Mediterranean was on fire. These were dark, dark days. The forces of Nazi Germany and her fascist partners in Italy, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary had overrun much of Europe and large portions of North Africa. In early November, the Allies struck back with Operation Torch, landing in North Africa, French Morocco, and Algeria. In addition to the tanks, trucks, jeeps, munitions, food, supplies, and reinforcement troops, there were also photographers, artists, reporters, and printing presses. The Stars and Stripes was a newspaper, a military newspaper written by and for the men of the armed forces. It was a weekly, and it carried war news and news from home, complete with sports and features, cartoons and letters. Now, somewhere along the line, quite early in the game, the editors got the idea to publish poetry. Poems that were submitted by soldiers out in the field could find their way into print. These works and these writers became the pup tent poets.
At 8 a.m. we're pulling out, the general sternly said. So the colonel sent the order down. At 5 we leave our bed. Well, the captain took no change, because captains never do. And so he told the top kick, have the men get up at 2. At midnight, the sergeant woke us, and here we sadly sat, because it is now noontime and we haven't pulled out yet. Technical Sergeant 5, Carl D. Westerberg. This land, which once was strewn with blood, symbol of mighty clannish passions, now is littered with GI mud and used up tins of old sea rations. Warrant Officer, junior grade, Henry J. Boner. Dirty Gertie from Bizerty hid a mousetrap in her skirty, strapped it on her kneecap purdy, basted with a fleur de flirty, made her boyfriends most alerty. She was voted in Bizerty Miss Latrine of 1930. This was Private William L. Russell. Rain soaked my bed and my baggage. It's happened before, or I'd cry. But I think it's worth it, for I feel so damn good when I dry. Lieutenant Rose C. Craig.
Wally Lamb is already a local legend for being the record keeper. In fact, he owns more than 1,000 records. In fact, it's quite a bit more than that at this point, isn't it?
100,000.
100,000 records,
yes.
All the way back as early as...
Well, 1890s.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you're here today not just as Wally Lamb, the record keeper, who's been maintaining a record of all this amazing music and the history that goes along with it, but also as a proud representative of our country. So can you tell our audience and our viewers where you served and in what capacity?
Yes, I'll start with the beginning. I went into the service in 1943, and they shipped me out to become what they call a parachute rigger. In those days, you didn't have to jump parachutes, thank goodness. But I was a parachute rigger, and I studied that and went through all the phases of that. And finally, we get to the jumping off point, as they might call it, where we went overseas. And at the time to go overseas, I was approached by a young man who wanted to trade places with me because his friend was going on a different ship from him. And since I had no particular choice about ships, I traded with him.
Now this is when you were going to the Mediterranean during World War II.
This is when I'm getting ready to leave to go overseas. I was still in the States. And so he came to me and asked me if I would trade. His name was Sergeant York. He was a cousin of the original World War I, Sergeant York.
Wow.
Anyhow, he and his friend got together on the other ship I traded. And when we got over into the Mediterranean, they kept us in the Mediterranean Sea there, waiting for 26 days. And during that time, close to the end of our stay there, one evening at twilight, a Messerschmitt came from the North African coast, flew in. He was coming from the sun, so our gunners couldn't see him and they couldn't shoot him down. And he dropped a bomb on the trailer right behind us, on that ship right behind us was the ship that Sergeant York and his friend were on.
So that was the ship that you were supposed to be on.
That was the ship I was supposed to be on.
You were actually in the Mediterranean Sea and watched your own ship.
Well, we weren't allowed to watch. In those days, they kept you down. We were what they used to call a banana boat. It was a huge old cargo boat, and everybody had to stay down in the below deck on it. The only ones up on the deck when the alarm sounds is the sailors that are going to do the gunning or whatever to protect you. After we landed at Naples, Italy, we had to take a train from Naples into Venosa, where we were. And that was a long train ride. In fact, we even got strafed by a German airplane on the way there. Luckily, I didn't get hit, and nobody in my box, we went in boxcars, nobody in my boxcars got hit. I can't say about anybody else in the others, because they don't, in those days, everything was secret. You did not know from one person hardly to the other.
Yeah, it sounds like you spent a lot of time having to wait, rush somewhere and then wait.
Oh,
rush somewhere and then wait.
That's the story of the service. Any service person will tell you that. It's a hurry to hear, and then you wait an hour for the next order to do, next movement to make practically. It was always hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. And we went through that. That's a part of being a GI, as we called ourselves in those days. But, you know, we spent, I was there from May of 1944 until May of 1945, 1 year. We spent there. We went through a winter there and all. And it was a lot of bummed out roads around, and if you went very far, you would be going over roads trying to miss all the holes in them from the bombs had fell over the years of the fighting. But all in all, it wasn't all that bad once we got into there. My very worst part was the bombing in the Mediterranean before we even got to land.
Well, what were you all thinking? Was when you're under, because you can't see what's going on.
No.
You feel the boat rocking. You hear the sounds. Well, you've been trapped under there for days in these close quarters.
Well, we were out on deck normally.
Okay.
But we only were kept under there when anything was happening.
So you didn't even know if it would been your boat that was hit or not.
We thought it was our boat had been hit. I know. We all thought it was our boat, but it just so happened it was the one right behind us. And I am told it was blown to smithereens. Nobody was ever found from it. It was just blown to pieces. Now, that I was told that is not an official thing, because you didn't get told officially.
Right.
My job had been moved up to the Pentagon, and I worked there from the time I got out of the service till 1949. But my service in the Mediterranean, and I remember reading the Stars and Stripes. In fact, I have, half a dozen or so Stars and Stripes home there somewhere in my collection of everything. But I remember reading it, and I'm sure I read some of the poems and all. You just don't remember everything you've read, so sure. I'm sure I read a great deal of it, because that was the only reading you had other than I will say that people of this country a lot of them donated a lot of things, particularly the little paperback books, novels, or whatever, and we had them all the time going through. I know I read one going overseas, and I don't know how many people read them now, but it was a man by the name of Thorne Smith, and he wrote slightly naughty kind of little stories. And in fact, they had a television program of Thorne Smith's stories, and Thorne Smith's program, it was pretty much his stuff on these programs back in the 50s, black and white, I can remember. But he was quite funny in those days, and we used to read those books and other kind of books. But we got across the sea pretty much entertained, and I'm sure most people realize that back in those days there was no such thing as television for the average people. It had been in New York in 1943, I understand, but nobody heard of television really until 1948. So all we had was radio. And overseas there in our area, there was a program that was aimed at us GIs from Germany. Her name was Berlin Sally, and she used to broadcast every day and play popular American music over the air and give her little propaganda pitch here, there, and all through it to try to say why were we fighting Germany and those kind of things.
Keep the morale up.
But that was the way it was in those days, and that's all you could hear. And we could get it clear down in Italy, and this was broadcast from Germany. I assume it was all short wave, but we got it. So we heard Berlin Sally many times. But other than that, and they had American music on the radio, and we would listen to the radio when we could. Otherwise, you spent time either reading or in your tent, and you had the nice, very comfortable wooden canvas beds.
Right.
Sacks, as they called them back in those days. And that is the comfort of home that you had.
So now, I know that you do a lot of presentations now, including at your church, where you will bring some of your 100,000 plus record collection, and a lot of the music that you teach about, that you give history on, is music like one of the records that you brought for us to share today.
Right.
Records from this time, from the time of the world wars, and from the time that soldiers were listening to this music overseas. So when you hear this music now, when you're talking to people about this music now, how does it relate to that time back then? What is it that you want people to get from it?
To me, music takes me back to that time. I use those records and songs that I knew back then in memory to put me right back there. I can see what was happening then. I can be a part of it then in my mind. And to me, that's one of the main reasons I collect records like that, because they're my memories. I can go from year to year to year and have all of them play, and some of them I sing along with, such a voice that I have, very little, but that is my memories. In fact, I equate the year to a song. If I talk about 1941, I'll think of several songs that came out that year.
And what is the record that you brought us today? Was it a 1942 record?
This was a 1942 record, and it was one that was, it didn't gain great popularity, but it was somewhat popularity then because it told you what it was like being in the service. It was $21 a day, once a month. Now that's what you got paid for a month, $21. And they raised it by the time I got in latter 1943, or May of 1943, they had raised it to $25 a month.
Ooh.
But that is all servicemen got. Now, you have to say you got your room and board, you got everything. All you had to do with that $25 is spend it the way you want for little things, you know, anything you need or anything you'd like to have, books. And the Stars and Stripes was free. You never had to pay for that. That was there for you. But everything else practically you had to buy. And if you went out like overseas in Italy, you wanted to get some souvenirs to bring back or something, you had to buy them. They weren't given to you. Right. And I spent a whole week in Rome one time during that period there in the summer. And I got to walk all around Rome, downtown Rome. And it was very interesting. I got to the Vatican, I got to the catacombs, I got to see all the old buildings and all that was downtown there. And I didn't have any money, but I enjoyed myself anyhow, just wandering around Rome. It was quite a little sorry for me.
Well, I'm glad that you got to come on the show and share some of your memories with us.
Well, I thank you, Carla. It's been a great pleasure. I enjoy telling my story to anyone and everyone who will listen to me. And people that know me know I'm telling the truth, because I talk all the time about my memories. I love sharing them.
We love hearing them.
This is a public service announcement. While swimming upstream in America, you must keep afloat. You don't want to stop and drown. And take notes. You might want to jot this down, because these quotes, the hottest thing that's been found since Mount Vesuvius burned up that town. Pompeii. I used to sip the Bombay back when. I used to think that crime paid. My friends, I can count on one hand. I'm only one man, and I overstand that we suffer from lack of unity, and we'll never see equality till you and her and him and me decide. We won't stand for genocide. Our youth, give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter take us to the very next chapter. Don't get caught up in the lie or rapture. Modern day slaves, and yes, we are still captured by the boob tube, Facebook, and YouTube actors, acting like they are the black man's savior, riddling keeping our children's good behavior stable. Keep your hands above table. No fast moves, and I won't have to gauge you. Trust you? Never have and never will, dude. You're bad for me, like asbestos in fast food, a catastrophe under the surface waiting to happen. And you wonder why black folks constantly be snapping. Look at the facts, black. Matter of fact, look at the past, Jack. No respect for those who think we've passed that. Malcolm X said you got to stand for something or fall for anything, but we ain't overcome nothing. And I ain't beating a dead horse or promoting negativity. I'm simply stating the facts and playing the hand that's given me. But every time a prophet speaks out, you know he's silenced. 9 times out of 10, his life ends in violence. And if we talk about it or write about it, y'all be like, oh, it's them again. You don't think we're swimming upstream in America? 2 words, George Zimmerman. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. My country, 'tis of thee, man. Screw America, 'cause they ain't done jack for me except break a brother's back for minimum wage. And when they catch me slanging dope, try to throw me in a cage. See, I did my thing over in the Gulf War, but then I had to think, what the hell am I fighting for? 'Cause red is the color of the blood of my brother that you spilt when you hung him from that tree. White is for the color of the sheets that they wore when they lynched real niggas or field niggas like me. Blue is for the eyes that peep from them sheets when I seen them burning crosses on my lawn. But black is the color that can cover all the others. I ain't gonna forget you. Word is born. See, you got Martin Luther, Malcolm X, a black man speak out, oh, he getting shot to death. Am I a racist? Nah, picture that. A black man can't be racist, just pro-black. And I stated as a natural fact, this country was built with blood, sweat, and tears and broken backs of our ancestors, a stolen people. And you got the nerve to call us equal We can't take it to these streets now, but we can take it to these beats now, because with our lyrics we can teach now, and if each one teach one, we're guaranteed to reach at least one, and we ain't preaching peace, son. It ain't work for Dr. King, so feel all the drama I bring. America, everything I say is true, why we still just niggas to you? My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. And after 400 years of being abused, I'll admit I'm still confused. Because on the other hand, don't get me wrong, Mr. President, see, I live here, I'm a U.S. resident, and though I'm hated as a black man, I wanted to take a little trip to Afghanistan. See, America, I don't know whether to love you or hate you, just give me something that a brother can relate to. Because I was mad as hell, not afraid when they crashed those planes into the World Trade. And yes, I shed a tear. Yes, I wept when I saw people leap to their death. Black, white, men, women, children, oh, they blew up more than buildings. And after that tragic catastrophe, I was ready once again to be all I can be and give my life for this red, white, and blue. So why am I still a nigga to you, America? I saw her for the first time in the library in the section of fiction. And she was giving some young sisters a lesson on diction. She said, enunciate, pronunciate, hold your heads high when you speak. I peered through the books in the section of fiction to watch this older woman teach. I watched her from a few tables over, pretending to be into my books, as she took them on a journey through history and social studies, even tips on preserving their looks. She explained to them that they were descendants of queens who ruled Egypt and not just slaves, although that part of our history was just as important as learning our God-given names. She instructed her pupils and nurtured them with wisdom, motherly, almost instinctively. And as she moved about them with the grace of a noble, her students, they watched her attentively. She finished her lessons with blessings for each, then stood by the door as each one hit the streets. Bye, serendipity, they said as they passed, and she kissed the hand of each, from the first to the last. And as her last student hit the street, she watched the setting sun and whispered, Allah, give me more time, for my job here is undone. I wondered what she meant, but was much too afraid to ask. I just watched from a distance as almost 2 years rolled past. I watched her students grow in number. I watched them grow in wisdom. I watched them grow from hard-haired young ghetto girls to beautiful, strong, young black women. And though I didn't know it then, I was a pupil too, because she taught me things about my people I admit that I never knew. One day, I went to the library and I sat in the section of fiction. The girls were there, but serendipity wasn't, and I strained my ears to listen. As the eldest whispered to the younger girls, with no tears but sadness in her eyes, explaining how a cancer took serendipity and that the night before she had died. And to my surprise, not one girl cried. Now, I wasn't as strong as Serendipity's girls. I ran as fast as I could. Blinded by tears and deafened by my own sobs, I stumbled my way back through the hood. A few years have gone by since then, and now I'm a man. And I finally returned to that library with my own daughter in hand. Together, we stood in the section of fiction. Were my ears deceiving me? No. I heard a lesson on diction. And she said, enunciate, pronunciate. Hold your heads high when you're speaking. I peered through the books in the section of fiction to see just who it was that was teaching. It was the youngest of Serendipity's girls. You see, the eldest had kept them together. And I see now that through her girls, Serendipity lives forever. Now, I'm still not as strong as Serendipity's girls. I watched a tear fall between my feet. But instead of stumbling my way back through the hood, I bid my own daughter, sweetheart, have a seat. Live on, Serendipity.
I'm here with A. Lee Brinson, who is also known as Ghetto Issue, or GI, an incredible spoken word artist out of Lancaster and host of Lancaster's premier spoken word venue, Poetic Soul, which meets every first Friday at Soul Restaurant. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, you performed as part of our Veterans Day tribute in actual full costume. What was the story? Because I know there is an actual reason why you were able to come out as an original Civil War Buffalo Soldier. Well,
as of September 21st, that was actually the day that we performed that reenactment, I guess we'll call it, or enactment. But September 21st was a special day because it's actually the 147th anniversary of the Buffalo Soldiers.
And for those that do not know at home what a Buffalo Soldier is, or they're not familiar with the term.
Well, 147 years ago, the U.S. Army put together a cavalry unit consisting of the so-called Negro soldier. And the Buffalo Soldiers basically were the ones who tamed the Wild West. You know, they were in charge of guarding hunting parties, wagon trains. They would guard the mail, watch over railroad workers. One of their biggest jobs was fighting Indians. So when you hear about the cowboys and Indians, it was mostly the Buffalo Soldiers.
A lot of the cowboys were the black men, which is not an image that you see that often.
Not prevalent at all, not at all, but we had a big part in taming the Wild West.
Now, what was it about the idea of men of color being engaged in things like warfare or the subjugation of a lot of the parts of the country? It's pretty controversial stuff for a lot of people. So what made that something that was so appealing for you personally?
Wow, it's just as a serviceman, I served in the Navy myself, aboard a nuclear submarine, but it was just an honor to portray these guys. I mean, they were known as the best at what they did. You know, the cavalry, they rode on horseback and they fought on horseback. You know, and these guys were excellent. They were actually sent to train officers at West Point because they were so good. They took the best of us and sent them over to West Point. And I keep saying us because I'm still stuck in the character of the Buffalo Soldier. But it was just a real honor and privilege to portray these guys because they blazed their way through history. I mean, literally, guns blazing, the Buffalo Soldiers.
That's amazing. Now, I noticed that in a lot of your poetry, there is almost what I would call an old school style of spoken word. When spoken word was almost its own form of cultural and artistic protest, as opposed to the more playful or performance-oriented art form that you see a lot more with some of the younger performers. You have a real political bent to it, a very simple, these phrases are absolutely in your face. You can almost hear the hip-hop flow to it. How would you describe your style and the way that you have chosen to portray yourself through your type of spoken word? Because it's not the same as what some of the young kids are coming out with nowadays.
Well, I'm not a young kid. You know, I've been around for a while, and I don't know what or how I would characterize my style. I just write what comes out the end of the pen, and how it hits me at the time is how I'll deliver it. Sometimes I'll take the same piece and deliver it totally different. But at the time, you know, and I usually have the same cadence to them, but I don't know, maybe it is because I'm old school. I'm an old school hip hop fan. I can't stand the rap music of today. Lil Wayne, I'd like to choke him, you know. It's hip hop, man. It's in need of a heart transplant. I know that. But I don't know. My style is just whatever it is, I guess. I mean.
So do people are they able to connect when you're doing things about political calls to action? When you're saying things that they don't necessarily want to hear or are comfortable hearing, how does your audience respond to that?
I think that's what makes, my brother, he has a phrase, the JPS factor, when you're doing a show, jolts per show. You know?
I love that.
And you want to take your audience up the hill and back down and back up, and you know, and I try to space out my stuff so that it's like that, but those in-your-face pieces, there's, you know, that's my heart. It's coming from my heart, so I don't care. I really don't care how they, you know. And I mean, that might sound bad, but it's like, okay, this is how I feel. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen. You know?
Well, when you go up on stage, what's your goal? Are you trying to connect to somebody? Are you doing this because it's just what you need to do to express, to stay sane? I mean, I've heard all kinds of reasons of what inspires people to keep creating and keep sharing, but it's different. It's always different.
I think writing it is part of, you know, helping to keep me sane, but performing it is like a release. You know, I love to perform. If it's not spoken word, it's doing reenactments. If it's not that, I'm in a play, I'm writing a play. That's show business is in me, so like I said, writing it is the therapy, but performing it is my release. I get out there and get to, boom, here it is. It's like painting a picture, and when you're done with it, show it to the world. You know? And there it is. When I'm done with my work, I can go out there and show it to the world, and if they appreciate it, that's just the icing on the cake. But if not, you're still gonna do what you do.
So how do you unite your history as a Navy serviceman and obviously having a strong attachment to and a belief in the work that you did then, the work that some of the Buffalo Soldiers did and some of these soldiers of color did settling the country, and then being a member of the liberal arts community, bunch of left-leaning hippies out there?
Well, I'm very patriotic. I am very patriotic. A lot of my stuff may sound like it's bashing America, but if you listen, on the second half of the poem America, it says, but on the other hand, you know, and I believe every black man must feel that way that's ever served his country. I was walking down the streets of Israel, and a man stopped me and asked me to come to dinner at his house. And I went, and his family wanted to know, why are you serving a country that can't stand you? And I thought about it, and the only answer I could come up with is, I live there. You know, this is my country too. I live here. I don't know anything else. This is my country. I'm going to fight for it. You know, my family's still there. So, you know, and that's what I think the Buffalo Soldiers and the colored troops, that's what I think they fought for. Because they knew that they weren't given any quarter. If they were caught, there was no taking prisoners. They were given no quarter. They were killed, hung on the spot, shot on the spot. But still, they chose to fight. And it's because they lived here. We have stake in, we built this country. So yes, I'm very patriotic. I don't like to see the flag burned. I don't like that. You know, I might not agree with all of the politics of our president that we have now, but I have enough sense to keep my mouth shut on the things that I don't agree with, and I'm going to vote. You know, I vote. And I promote that other people should vote. I can't stand it when people don't vote.
If you don't vote, you don't get the right to complain.
It's not even a right to vote. It's a family heirloom. It was a right for Martin Luther King and those guys who marched for it. They earned that. Now they passed it down to us. Voting is an heirloom for us. It's not even a right anymore. You can't call it a right. It's not a right.
Well, now, one of the other artists that we spoke to on this show, the 91-year-old man, Wally Lamb, he was also a serviceman, and he lived and has lived as an out gay man for the last 60 years. In fact, we only didn't speak about it because his partner just recently passed away. So part of why I wanted to have you and Wally reading and being the voice of these soldiers is because there is a lot in the image of servicemen that we have. There were black servicemen, there were gay servicemen, there were women that were, you know, they might not have been on the front lines, but they were serving all kinds of critical functions. And these are a lot of the faces that are not seen, that are not remembered in the tributes to our vets, that are not remembered when we're talking about who built and who founded and who contributed to the growth of this country. So that's my little soapbox for the day, and then I'm going to be done on it.
If you have a minute, when you said that there were women and men who weren't recognized, it reminds me of another story of the Buffalo Soldiers, of William Cathy. William Cathy enlisted as a cook, and he was a good shot, and one day he got shot. And everybody that knew Will Cathy always knew that there was something different about him, but they could never put their finger on it. Anyway, when he got shot, the doctor went to check out the wound, and they realized what was different about Will Cathy. Will Cathy was actually Cathy Williams.
Oh.
She was the only woman to ever serve as a Buffalo soldier. She was honorably discharged and received her disability pension for getting shot in the butt. But for 2 years, she masqueraded as a man and served as a Buffalo soldier. Yeah. I thought that was amazing too.
That is amazing. Courage knows all shapes and forms.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That don't ask, don't tell policy. If you're in a foxhole and there are bullets flying by you, you're not going to care who's squeezing that gun next to you as long as they can shoot straight.
You don't have to be straight, just shoot that way.
Just shoot straight, right. You know? So,
I heard that.
Yeah.
So now, today, fast forwarding to the GI of today, when you are creating these pieces and you are sharing them, what do you hope to see with the young artists that are coming up? We talk about the heirlooms, the things we pass on to the generation. What do you see yourself passing down, and what do you hope to see the next generation coming out with in their performances, their spoken word, their stories?
Wow. It's when I look at the new generations coming along, I am petrified. I am. My own children included. You know, my daughters, they scare me. My wife and I, we look at them sometime and we're just like, did we make these kids? Oh my goodness, you know. But at the same time, there's still hope, because it seems that as each generation goes by, they get smarter and smarter, younger and younger. You know, and I'm like, okay, there's maybe some hope, but, and I mean, I guess it goes the same for us. We, you know, our parents probably looked at us, was like, oh my goodness, you know, rap music.
Right.
Now I'm like,
it's
oh my
all,
God,
the world's
Little
all
Wayne,
going down.
Skinny jeans, and but I think if I could just, I don't want to sound cliche or steal a phrase, but like Tupac said, I might not be the one to change the world, but if I could spark that thought in the mind that does, and if someone years from now, someone looks at my work and goes, wow, I like that, and it causes them to be inspired to do something, that's cool with me. That's cool.
I think it can happen.
I hope so.
Well, thank you for sharing your work with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Literally getting into. If you want to do this, and I think this is one of the more interesting things, although watch your step, and let me get a light on here as I fall head over heels.
Wow. For those of you who thought that an organ was just the part of the keyboard that you see the organist playing, completely incorrect. Check out these pipes, and by that I mean this is actually the real organ. We are physically inside the instrument right now. Now, what are all of these pipes in here? Is each one of these pipes a different note or a different key?
On the keyboards that we'll see eventually out at the organ console, we'll find what we call stops or draw knobs, which most people are familiar with. Each of those knobs, each of those draw stops, controls one row of pipes, one pipe for every key on one keyboard. All these pipes that look similar belong to one stop, affected by the keyboard out at the console. So taken all together, there are between 3,000 and 5,000 pipes to this organ, located in 3 different chambers. This chamber that we're standing in now is the chamber, the pipes that the middle keyboard affects, called the great organ. All the pipes in this room over here are affected by the top keyboard, what we call the swell organ, and all the pipes behind us are for the lower keyboard, called the choir organ. We have what we call the blower, which is simply a high-speed fan that makes the wind that operates the organ. They have a little reed inside the foot here.
Like a woodwind.
Yeah, or like a harmonica or an accordion, for example. And when wind comes up through the pipe, that reed vibrates, and it's then resonated and amplified by the remainder of the pipe.
Now, what type of material is this made out of and why?
Usually a tin lead alloy. Lead produces a very resonant sound, but if the pipe were completely lead, what would happen to it?
It'd probably crush in on
Crush
itself.
under its own weight. Pure tin pipes can and are made also. They produce a very bright sound. So one of the organ builder's secrets is the alloy combination. Tin, lead, and some other things are thrown in there usually too. We give organ pipes human characteristics. Organ pipes have a body, they have a foot, they have a toe, and in the toe there's a hole which lets air go up through the pipe. That air is then split by the mouth of the pipe. Some pipes even have beards and lips and ears. The wind stream is split by the upper lip of the mouth and produces a sound just like when you blow across the top of a Coke bottle. So basically, that's how the organ works. These are the stops I was referring to, or the draw knobs. All of these stops affect this keyboard or manual. All of these affect this keyboard, the middle keyboard. All of these affect the lower keyboard. All of these affect the pedal board. So it's actually sort of 4 organs in one. This organ, the swell, this organ, what we call the great organ, this organ, the bottom manual, which we call the choir organ, and of course there's the organ I play with my feet, the pedal organ. These organs, these 4 organs, can be hooked together in various ways. The organ can be very soft. The organ can be very loud. You ready for this? Some organ stops sound like orchestral instruments. Here's a stop called the gedakt, which is a type of flute stop. Sounds somewhat like somebody playing a flute. An oboe. A trumpet. Clarinet? Oh, well, and so on. As I said earlier, each stop affects one pipe. There's a different pipe, different pipe, different pipe, different pipe, different pipe, different pipe. There are 61 keys, so there are 61 pipes brought into playing potential by this one stop. And that's true of every stop in the organ.
Now, when you are playing on this organ, do you have to play
all 4 keyboards at the same time? Is the music actually written to encompass all of the different types of sounds and keyboard levels?
50% of the time, you're playing on one keyboard. Another 49.5% of the time, you're playing on 2 keyboards at once. 0.5% of the time, and there's very little music written to be playing on all 3 keyboards. For obvious reasons, it's hard to navigate 3 keyboards at one time, and then of course your feet are added to it independently. And organ music is written on 3 5-line staves. One for the right hand usually, one for the left hand usually, and a 3rd staff for the pedals, which is a little bit different from other musical instruments as well. I just happen to have some music here. This is a slow movement from Alexandre Guillemot. One thing about the organ that is probably not true of any other musical instrument is the fact that when you push down a key, you take what you get. And there's nothing I can do to influence that sound. I can't blow harder, I can't make it go sharper, can't make it go flatter, can't make it get louder. You have to take what you get. But because some of the pipes in the organ are enclosed in a big wooden box with sort of Venetian blind type shutters on the one side. That's what I was doing with my right foot down here. As I push this pedal, the sound gets louder, and as I close it with my heel, the sound diminishes.
How long have you been playing the organ for?
I've been playing the organ 55 years, and one of these days I'll get good.
Do you find that, as you said, a lot of people can criticize the organ, you know, it's maybe considered old-fashioned, or there's not a whole lot of contemporary music being written for it. Do you still see interest in younger students learning how to play and continuing this tradition?
The trend today in most churches is toward praise bands, contemporary music, sort of jazz ensembles. Organ builders in America today are busy, however, building new instruments, restoring older instruments. The pendulum throughout history has swung back and forth. There is interest in the organ among young people. The York chapter of the American Guild of Organists regularly sponsors events for young people to introduce them to the organ and how it works. The other side of it is American colleges and universities have about 20% of the organ majors that were there when I was a student 100 years ago. But there are a lot of organists around who have doctorates in church music, doctorates in applied organ.
You said it's difficult to find a full-time job playing the organ, but for 55 years, it's something that you've continued to do and not wanted to give up. Why?
Well, and I might add that I did raise a family. I'm married and have 2 children, and we were very lucky. I was never without work, and I always had a good position. The early 20th century, from about 1900 through 1960, was sort of the golden age of the organ in America in churches. But a trend also today is to place organs in concert halls. Kimmel Center, the Disney Center for the Performing Arts, Kennedy Center just got a beautiful new organ not too long ago. Like with so many other things in American culture today, there are many organs being installed in Asia, in Japan, China, and many of the winners of organ playing competitions today are from South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Indonesia.
What do you think appeals, what is it about the sound of the organ and organ music that appeals to a culture with such a different musical heritage?
The one thing that appeals to all organists is, I mean, you can't beat that. That just, you've got all this power, and that certainly is attractive to anybody, or at least gets your attention. I'd like to play a little bit of another piece for you that is probably one of the most glorious organ pieces ever written, and I'm only going to play a little bit of it. But this is the toccata from the Fifth Symphony of Charmer Vidor, and it's one of the most popular organ pieces ever written, and certainly is a thrilling piece to listen to, and about 7 or 8 minutes of pure hell for the organist.
Are you allowed to say that in here?
Oh, good heavens. For another 6 or 7 minutes. Well, thank you. Thank you.
That gave me goosebumps. It literally gave me goosebumps.
It's thrilling. It truly is.
I certainly remember growing up and, at Christmas time, the sound of the organs swelling through the night, or, on a particular Sunday, you knew that you were coming to church, and you knew that you were someplace important, and you knew that something special and powerful was about to happen, and you needed to pay attention and be fully mindful and fully present in that moment. There's something about the organ that just says, this is an important and special moment, and I need you to be right here, right now. And I don't know of another instrument that makes me feel that way so instantly when I hear it.
Well, bless you, my child. you just described what attracts many of us to the organ, no question about that. I never wanted to do anything else. I mean, I can't remember ever wanting to be a chemist or a farmer, or, although I often said if there was anything else I would rather be, it'd be a farmer, but that's never going to happen. But I was very lucky. When I was about 12 years old, many Yorkers will recognize the two names Margaret Mal Carlee and Otmar Carlee. Otmar being the contemporary artist in York, Margaret Mal Carlee being a wonderful voice teacher, and in her prime had one of the most glorious voices I've ever heard in my life, and I hope she sees this and hears this program. Margaret Mal Carlee was singing with the choir of Zion Church when Zion Church was still downtown, right beside the Yorktown on Duke Street, right behind Christ Lutheran Church. Two Lutheran churches back to back. At that time, and I'm talking about the 1940s, 50s, early 60s, Zion Church had the only act in town when it came to church music. They had a wonderful choir who regularly, a paid choir I might add, or at least many of them were paid. They did major works from Messiah to King David to Mozart, Coronation Mass. Margaret Mal Carlee was the soprano soloist, and she introduced me to their organist. 62 years, Adam Hom served as the organist and choir master of this congregation. And he was my mentor, he was my inspiration, he introduced me to the organ, he was my first organ teacher, and I just appreciate so much the fact that when Zion left downtown, built this new church up here on the hill and north of the city, they brought the pews, the altar, and the organ, although they refurbished it, from the downtown church. This is the same organ I first took lessons on. And it's allowed me in my career, which is going to end in another month, it's allowed me to go full circle. And I just am so appreciative of the Zion congregation for allowing me that wonderful opportunity. Some 55 years later. Well, it's emotional for me too, and I can't talk about it anymore.
Thank you for sharing this with us. I definitely learned way more about the organ than I knew ever existed or was even a part of it. Can you share one more little piece with us before we go?
Yeah, I just happen to have a few more things here. Maybe I'll do something that I'm going to play on Sunday as a prelude. This is based on a good old Lutheran chorale, Praise to the Lord the Almighty, although it's by the contemporary composer Jan Bender, so it's going to sound a little bit different than many of us notice it, because it's sort of done up in a contemporary flavor, and classically contemporary, not the other kind of contemporary that we find in churches. I'll play at least some of it. Starts out with a harmonization of the chorale itself. Chorale simply being a hymn from the 16th, 17th centuries. said the organ's an old-fashioned instrument. There is still wonderful music being written for the organ in both a traditional idiom and contemporary idiom. It's an instrument of our time.